Paltrocast now with Darren Paltrowitz. Get ready to listen to your favorite artists.
Paltrocast.
Very nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Great show, by the way. Cheap Trick. Love it.
We'll come back to that after we talk about how great your new show is. How's that?
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you.
So one of the things I like to find out about when I speak with showrunners is kind of where they came from, because these days a lot of showrunners were stand-up comics. Sometimes they were just producers and supervising producers. Sometimes they were failed actors, etc. Who and what is Barry L. Levy?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I have definitely worn my fair share of hats. I had, when I was in undergrad, I wrote and directed a feature, got me to the START program at SC, and became a producer, wound up as an executive in an animation studio, making kids television where everyone either quit or got fired. And so over a 3-year period, put more than a dozen shows on the air and learned way too fast how to do way too many different skills, and kind of lost along the way what I wanted to do until I know this is the rambling thing. I mean, my God, Sheila's.
This is the interesting stuff, Barry. I mean,
she's wound up realizing I was no closer to writing, which was always my dream. So I wound up leaving the job. My boss was so appreciative for all the years of the hard work, gave me a consulting gig that allowed me to write a bunch of low-budget direct-to-video horror movies. And then I wrote Vantage Point, and then was writing thrillers for 20 years, working on one-hour dramas, ghostwriting, doing all of the various jobs that writers do. And as it was, I had a family. We had identical twin daughters and a son. And as they came of age, it was clear watching, kids' movies and kids' shows were not always my favorite task when there weren't things on multi-layers. When we saw E.T. again, it really inspired me. E.T., which I loved as a child, I had no idea growing up that Elliot's father had run off with a flight attendant to Mexico. And I realized that there were so many layers there that were bringing in all sorts of audiences where they could feel real, emotional, grounded feelings while they were telling a larger story. So while that was going on, my son was larger than, he was tall, and my daughters were not, and they looked like triplets. And all of a sudden, people started to mistake him for one, and he had to figure out his own identity from a very early age. Who was he? Not who were they? And for him, that was a tough thing that became a bedtime story. Well, let's talk about a character named Ben who could be anyone. Who would you be? And that became the impetus of the show about a boy named Ben who can be anyone in the world. Who does he want to be? And so for me, sort of writing outside the box, I had been producer of a half dozen independent films. I had been an executive. I have done the writing in TV and film. It was the logical sort of next step that I had the opportunity to sit down with Tara Sorensen at Apple and tell her that personal story, but also tell her that I wanted to build the Apple cinematic universe, not from comic books, but from a bunch of characters that we're going to watch grow up. And they'll be real and they'll be authentic, and their stories and themes will be important themes, such as with Ben, the questions of identity. And in a world where there are more identities than ever before for this generation. And so having said all of that, it became very clear that there was something sort of special here, and that we were off to the races from there.
So personal, yet layered, yet relatable.
I like that. Yeah, that sounds about right. What you said.
Well, another thing that's interesting to me about you, and I did know about your credits before that wonderful explanation, is at some point in your career, you went from B. Lewis to Barry L. Was that a conscious decision? Was that like, okay, the horror people know me as B. Lewis, the family-friendly stuff, Barry L.?
Okay, so I love that you just brought that one up. B. Lewis was actually me as a beard for someone else who had written a horror movie that is so unwatchably bad that I, to this day, tried to get my name off of it, and they will not let me let go, even though I did not write that. I did write my fair share of direct-to-video horror, but that wasn't one of them.
So that was your Alan Smithy moment.
Sure. Yes. Yes.
Well, it's fantastic.
You brought that up. That's awesome. Yeah.
Let's face it, IMDb never goes away once it's there, for better and for worse. But it's great to hear that you've got this career where you not only stuck with it, but you learned how to actually do all the stuff. Because I can't tell you how many directors or showrunners never directed, don't know how to use the equipment and all that. So you're one of those actual paying your dues kind of people.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think I did pay my dues up front. I mean, I sort of fell into a job where no one else could survive, and that sort of got me a head start. But along the way, I sort of had to pay my dues as I went, for sure. And there was something also coming from a graduate program focused on producing, of learning how to sort of learn the ropes from the start. All the sort of technical aspects, as well as the sort of how do you move through this town.
Got it. This show, did you know outright that you didn't just want to create, that you also want to showrun? Because a lot of times people go, if I create it, someone else showruns, then I could work on creating my own thing at the same time and have two shows going. Yeah,
no, because this show was always a love letter to my kids. This was so important to me I was turning down other opportunities because I wanted to make sure that I could be here to do this. I mean, my daughters are about to start their senior year in high school. So I was worried we would miss that sort of moment of being able to do this together. And so that was what was important for me.
Got it. So is this the latest thing you worked on? Are there other things in the pipeline that we'll be seeing in the near future?
There are a couple other things that, knock wood, you'll be seeing in the future, but certainly that I've worked on simultaneously, and then since as well. There's a movie based on a Korean language format, The Terror Live, that I adapted. That we're hopefully getting our production financing in the next few weeks. I'm developing for TV the Harrison Ford action comedy Hollywood Homicide as a 1 hour. Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah, both of them are more sort of what I've traditionally done. But like I said, this was always going to be this sort of open letter, to Noah, Ben, and Jordan. So.
Yeah, so you were incredibly hard to pigeonhole. We can't just go, oh, it's a Barry Levy joint, therefore it's horror. Therefore, we don't know if it's going to be TV, film, which genre, or how many minutes it's going to be.
Yeah, that's what you tell young writers not to do. But I think. Yeah, that's also true. But no, I've been really fortunate to have had the multiple opportunities in multiple different arenas, and you do learn along the way a lot of humility, but you also learn, if you're smart, you learn skill sets that can translate.
Well said. So going back to the beginning of the conversation, you ever seen Cheap Trick live?
I did not, but my kids also know that Surrender is a song you don't mess with. It's just pure. It's awesome.
Harder to sing than you'd realize. I bet if you're playing Rock Band or one of those, you go, I like that song, but like the national anthem, it goes higher than you think it's going to go.
Right. But let's be clear. When you're tone deaf, they're all hard to sing.
Are you a secret rock and roll guy?
Not really. I mean, I definitely wanted to make sure that music was an influence here, because it was sort of a shared language of multi-generations. And, had we had our druthers, I think there's probably more songs we would have layered in as well. As a rock and roll nerd, I mean, I was thrilled that at one point we were contemplating Beastie Boys, and we had one of their songs ready to go. And to Michael Dowse's credit, for a lot of different reasons, to his credit, but he sort of talked me down of going what we needed in the moment and what was going to be distracting. And while it was a sort of a dream of mine, maybe wasn't the right thing for Ben. So,
are you allowed to say which Beastie Boys song almost got used?
You know what? I'm sure I'm allowed to, but to be honest with you, there were 2 or 3 that we circled. The one that we probably landed on was Jimmy James.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But there was a few others that were circled at various points. But it was sort of important because we're trying to track generations. And so you have Cat Stevens, you have, Don Henley, and you had some other sort of newer music as well. But we wanted to sort of capture, trying to find Ben's voice meant also trying to find what spoke to him in the realm of music. And this was something that probably was too broad of a swing. But, oh, man, it was so influential to me as a person that I wanted to honor it.
The 3 artists you just happened to name are all notoriously hard to license.
So one of the things about writing your love letter to your kids that is you're super passionate about is you write passionate letters to performers who were thrilled, and I sent them the scripts and I explained why it was so important and meaningful. And we had, I mean, to their credit, to their ever loving credit, I mean, they were all generous of purpose. No one made it difficult at all, and I was so grateful.
Got it. Well, one last me question, one last Barry question, then I'll let you go. And the me question is, who's the first person that was attached to it from a cast? Because usually there's one person that comes on board and then people go, oh, they're there? I'm there too.
So the casting director is Joshua Einson, who had done This Is Us. He had done a bunch of other bigger shows, and he and I go way back. And he sort of, and I talked at length about trying to find a performer, for Max and Ben, almost as a 1 and 1A, not like a 1 and a 2. And once we knew that we wanted River, we really were looking at a Max that could not just hold her own up against him, but also embrace him. Like, who was the sister that he needed to have? Mm-hmm. And Abby just had such incredible range that both of them together, it was like, this is too obvious. Let's not screw this up. It has to be them. And then Amanda Reed was third on that list, but Amanda, interestingly enough, was the first one that Josh had ever seen. And he had seen her months before we started casting, and he just knew she was Carter, and we should just stop questioning. And it was that simple. So,
got it. And the last question, ending on a stupid note here, I like to find out when people have the same name as somebody else, if they've ever met. Do you have any interactions, history, or photos with the reggae artist Barrington Levy?
Not only do I not have anything with him, there's a Barry W. Levy who had been on the X-Files and is a character actor. Nothing with him. And there's apparently an author in Santa Monica, Barry L. Levy, as well. And I have only received references to all of them and never met any of them. I don't think they exist. How about that?
Okay. Follow-up question. Has any mail for Barry Levinson accidentally come to you?
No, but when I used to be an executive, whenever I called CAA, because he was a big client there, I always got my calls in before my boss did, because they all heard me say fast Barry Levy as opposed to Barry Levinson, and then they just put him right through.
Awesome. I'm not going to top that. Barry, thank you for your time. Congrats on the show, and looking forward to what's to come from you.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Be well.
Paltrocast.
Thank you for taking the time. The first question I have is, am I allowed to call you EDR, or is that just the Dabbleverse thing where they call
No, EDR is what everyone's always called me. Yeah, so that the Dabbleverse thing's pretty exciting. We'll get into that, but EDR is fine.
Yeah, so you have the big show coming up in Bridgeport. I think you were recently on PLR. Were you on Chaz and AJ in the morning to hawk the show?
I'll be on Chaz and AJ coming up this Friday morning.
Oh, got it. Yeah, great crew over there. They had me on a few times back in December to promote my book. Do you like doing the morning radio thing? Because comics tend to have a love-hate thing with the morning radio.
Well, I used to do morning radio. Matter of fact, ironically, PLR was the station I used to do mornings at a long time ago. And so it's kind of a reunion there because I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I've done WQXA, which is 105.7 in Harrisburg, and a bunch of different radio stations. I've probably been doing radio like 25 years. So, and for me, getting up early in the morning is not that bad of a thing. I know most comedians hate it. I lucked out with it because I'm able to be on the radio and be on a morning show and not have to go into your material, since I have to do it every day. A lot of comedians don't like doing radio because they're like, well, if I do my material here, what are they going to come see? And so for me, I've always had to kind of gift the gab, and I was able to do the morning without getting into any of my material. So,
well, you also have the distinction, unlike most comedians, in being a fitness person. So how are you able to do it where you're a person who actually gets stuff done in the morning, is productive, yet can stay up at night to do the gig?
Well, the weird thing is that's the hard part about it, because your middle of the day is the part that's free the most. That's wide open. You get up and you have to be effective early in the morning. You perform, you got to be effective at night. And that middle ground is basically where you do your sleep and your banking and everything else, it would seem like. But it's funny because I just got used to it, and I just put myself in kind of a regiment, and once in a while I stray from that regiment, but I find out when I do it and I keep it that way, that's the best way to keep everything going.
Got it. So in terms of your comedy, obviously it evolves over the years, but I'm impressed at how many different demographics you satisfied. Like the fact that you can do the PLR in the morning stuff, you could do the Dabbleverse stuff, you could do the blue collar Bill Engvall thing kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So how does your comedy these days compare to when you first started the 25-ish years ago? You were on Up All Night, right?
Yeah. Up All Night, and back in the day, evening at the Improv, Caroline's Comedy Club. I ran the whole A&E gambit, a couple of late night shows. Here's the thing that changes over the years. I think the longer you do this and stay with it, the better you're supposed to get. Because right now I know who I am, so I don't sit there and go, "Geez, how much time do I have to do?" and figure everything else out and format what I want to do. I pretty much have that all in me now, and I just go ahead and perform. And my biggest thing for me now is, hey, tell me when you want me to stop. And then I'll have my ending to it and where it kind of goes, you know?
Okay. So to rudely interrupt you, that was where I was looking to go. So is your set pretty much, you know how it starts, you know how it ends, and then the middle is depending on the vibes and how you feel and how it's going?
Well, usually what happens with me is like I've become comfortable with who I am with it and like performing. I know I can do the job, so I kind of work off in front of me. It's so funny when you talk about crowd work, which is what the terminology they call it is now. I call it being interactive. It sounds a lot more intelligent, but crowd work makes it sound like, yeah, it does. Crowd work, you know, all of a sudden people are like, well, here's a comedian like Matt Rife. That's, oh, wow, he works the crowd. And they don't understand. This is no disrespect to Matt Rife, but it's people have been doing that forever. And then all of a sudden, a certain genre will click onto it and go, wow, this is amazing. But they don't understand that a good comedian is able to perform in front of any audience, whether it's like I have the National Fraternal Order of Police coming up, or whether it's the Appel Center Theater in York, Pennsylvania, or whatever. You know, you have to be able to adapt to that audience. You could have, let's say you have 50 jokes. And let's say you have different kind of venues that have different kind of demographics. You have to, as a performer, have to be able to determine on those 50 jokes what that particular audience can take. You know, you just don't have 50 and then you just throw 50 at every audience. You know, You have to be able to kind of fill it out. Now, if you're a big name, you can do that because people expect you to do that. But if you're a person that has to go up there and prove themselves every time, like most of us, you know, you have to be able to adjust to what it is. A corporate guy is going to say, well, listen, I want to make sure that it's like this. And, you know, it's got to be, you know, correct and blah, 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 blah. And most comedians or a lot of comedians go, well, hey, I do what I do. No, I do what you want me to do. OK, if you take your car in, you need brakes done. I don't work on your air conditioning because I believe that's what they need to do. That's how it should be able to work.
Yeah, you raise a really good point about crowd work. I remember back in the day seeing Howie Mandel. He kind of knows how it starts, it ends, and then the whole middle is crowd stuff. Rickles, yes, the jokes were already written, but Rickles was all crowd work, and no one gave Don Rickles any flack for just being 100% interactive, as you would say.
Well, it's so funny with Don Rickles. You mentioned him because I had an experience with Don Rickles one time. And matter of fact, on my resume, Don Rickles had said, this guy works the audience like a Vegas showgirl, is what he said was a quote that was on there. And years ago, I ran into him and I got to see him right before he passed away. But it's funny when you talk about being entertaining, it all depends on what the crowd and working the crowd. I think there are a lot of people that, you know, shun against that and they go, well, crowd work is not comedy work. I believe, look, I just want to entertain you. Okay. I want to be funny and I entertain you. Okay. My thing is like, you know, you just have to go out there and prove yourself every night. Perfect example, if I may. Perfect example. The reason why comedy is a little different now, not even difficult, it has to do with anything. People go all politically correct and everything. Let's throw that to the side. Let's go to the fact that right now that everyone believes they can do comedy. Everyone is allowed to do comedy. You go on the internet and I go through my reels. I see people, who the heck is this guy? No disrespect to that guy, but I've never heard of him, but he's able to do comedy and perform. There's no vetting in it. is you just go ahead and you do. You can have 1 million followers on Facebook or Instagram or whatever the kids are on, the TikTok, Ding Dong, whatever they're on now. Whatever they're on, you can have 1 million followers and some club will put you in there. And all you have to do is make sure that you can perform. Now, a lot of times you can have 1 million followers and maybe have 10 seconds of comedy, but these clubs are about filling the seats. So comedy's a lot more difficult now. The media has changed it too. There's probably about 40 or 50 people they ram down your throat that you see in everything. And it's great because it promotes comedy, but it promotes comedy on that level. I can give you 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people that you've never heard of before that will kill, and they kill every time they go out. And that's why it's got to be like, people will go, well, I've never heard of you before. Why should I go see you? And my own thing is like, okay, well, think of famous doctors that are doing really well. Dr. Joyce Brothers will say, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Phil. Think of all these doctors that make all this money and everything. And you've heard of them. You know who you never heard of that does really well too? Your doctor. Right. Okay. So it doesn't matter if you're in that genre and you do well in that genre, you will do well.
Yeah, you raise a really good point right there about there being journeyman comics, but also comics who kill on the corporate scene that we don't know about. I remember, random example, Dana Carvey, for years and years and years, we were going, what happened to that guy? And turns out he was just killing on the corporate scene. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a genre. Look, there's room for everybody in this business, but it's like the problem about this business is, no one tells you can't do it. Now you might go on up and see some people that are horrible, and they'll be back there next week. Now people say, hey, well, you know what? If you get practice, you'll get better at it. That might be so. That might be it. But when it comes to being a comedian, it's like, well, you can be doing it like as long as, I don't know, Don Rickles had been doing it and call yourself a comedian. And then you can go to open mic night and they'll go, all right, tonight we've got 10 comedians coming up. And they're not comedians. They're open mic people. They just go under the title of comedian. So it's just one of these things where it's starting to get really, really vast. The clubs are starting to go, oh, wow, you know what? We need to bring in these big, huge name people all the time. And most of those people, when they go to a comedy club, end up getting the door. They end up getting the door, and the club maybe makes something on drinks and everything. And I always say when it comes to comedy clubs, that's why your comedy club should be like your favorite steakhouse. Like, you go there because the steak's going to be good. You don't know who's making the steak. You just know you're going there. You don't even have to know who's cooking the steak. You're going, hey, let's go to so-and-so for the steak. And it's good like that. So once you get to a point where you're having to compete with getting into these clubs and stuff, I have like a huge stage set and everything, and I'm doing theaters now. I just started putting myself out there and doing theaters. You got to make your own way in this business because it doesn't like anybody. There's no rules. And if anyone says, hey, I want to be a comedian, I just go, good luck, because I can't discourage you. I did a gig one time a long time ago. It was in Pittsburgh, and I went up there, and it was a crappy crowd, and the guy went up before me and he ate it, and I went up after that, and I kind of ate it and everything else. And that guy asked me, he goes, I think I'm going to stick at this. And I go, okay, that's great. And you stayed at it. But that guy turned out to be Shane Gillis. Okay. Oh. So now, and he lives right around the corner from here, basically where I live. So it's one of these things where there are no rules. It all just comes together the way it's supposed to come together. And all you can do is just be the best you can every night you're up there.
Hey, I keep giving you praise and saying I agree with you, but it is real. It is legitimate right here. And speaking of Shane Gillis, the fact that Kill Tony is playing Madison Square Garden just kind of tells you that every rule about stand-up comedy is out the window, and you just kind of have to make up your own thing. It's not, unfortunately, for better and for worse, it's not about paying your dues, getting good after a certain amount of years, and then becoming a comedian. For some people, it's get the TikTok following and then start advertising you're doing shows.
Well, you see a guy like with Shane Gillis, he's just good. And he hit right at a sweet spot. And he's good. And that happens once in a while. There's no overnight success in this business, but there's pretty damn close. And he's one of these guys that he just clicked with the right people, and and got to go. And then, of course, bad news travels better than good news, and the whole Saturday Night Live thing. And then all of a sudden people are going, well, they don't want that guy on Saturday Night Live. Let's go over here and look and see what he did that they don't want him on there. And then all of a sudden you get a good following with it. So, but it's you have all different kinds of comedy. Now you got everyone doing roasting and all this other kind of stuff, and I remember back in the day, because I'm like 900 years old, is like, I remember D. Martin roast.
Oh, yeah. Foster
yeah,
Brooks.
Yeah, right. And all of those things, and how that worked and how it is now. And now, you see the roast coming up now. Comedy Central puts on a roast. But then I look at a local comedy club and they're roasting another, the local comedians, the open mic guys are roasting another guy. And I'm going, well, I don't even understand how that is. Aren't you supposed to have somebody with some kind of recognition to go, oh, they're going to roast Tom Brady? I got to see what that is. But, if you're working, it's like well, we're going to roast Joey Schmuckface. It's like, okay, well, I can either go to the roast to see Joey, or I can go see him work at the supermarket and in produce next week. So, it's all over the place. There's no form of comedy that people go, hey, this is great. Your great monologists like a Seinfeld or something like that, this is almost far and few in between. And then there's guys out there that are like really, really brilliant, like the Bill Burrs, and you see the Chappelles and the Chris Rocks and everything. And so when you take that level away and you go to the next level, my point being is, even though that's fantastic, I can almost guarantee you, if you go to a comedy club to see a comedian that you've never heard of, he's probably going to be good. Because remember, the people that put him in there want to give you the best that they want to give you too. So, people say that in the Dabbleverse, they throw around the word hack all the time. This guy's a hack. This guy's a hack. This is a guy. Look, if you're working and people are paying to see you and you're getting paid, you're not a hack. Okay. I don't know if it's a slang word that they use now, but you can say, well, that guy's a hack. Well, what did he do? Well, he's performing here and he's got a schedule. Then he's not a hack. Okay.
Yeah. I think I remember hack coming from the generation of Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn people, all the Comedy Cellar kind of guys. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of funny. The two biggest people using the word hack are people who don't even do stand-up at all.
Well, that's the thing too. And I find that kind of irritating, because it's like going, it's like me, I never go to an NFL game and go, well, that guy sucks. I never say that. You know why I don't say that? Because he's there and I'm watching that guy. Despite what you think about the NFL, there's a long, tedious process to get in it. Okay. That's why I'm talking to you here and you're talking to me here, and we're not at training camp, because we suck. We're hacks when it comes to football. So I never really come out and say anything about pro football. Plus, my friend used to be the strength and conditioning coach for the Ravens, and I got to stand on the sideline from there. And that was intimidating in itself. So the hack word is just one of these things, I guess, that a lot of comedians find offensive, because it's almost like calling someone a loser. You defend not to be a loser,
or a loser.
Or a loser. Yeah.
Paltrow